Is great to see. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining today's conversation. So we're here to talk about one of my favorite topics, and I know many of you are very passionate about this, the issue of chemicals of concern in beauty and personal care products and cosmetics, an issue that I don't know has gotten enough attention, but really such an important public health and environmental justice issue. So in today's live chat, we're going to be talking about why we should be concerned about harmful chemical ingredients, chemicals like phthalates and parabens and mercury and formaldehyde in beauty and personal care products. We'll hear a little bit from Lindsay about what Beauty Counter has done in this space as a real pioneer brand. Hey, Lindsay. We'll also hear from Sophia at We Act for Environmental Justice about why this is an issue that's of particularly relevance in this day and age when we've been having a national conversation around racial injustice, racial equity, why this is an issue that's particularly important because folks of color, particularly women, face disproportionate exposures to chemicals in beauty and personal care products, especially those products marketed to women of color, like hair straighteners and relaxers. We'll also talk a little bit about how retailers are beginning to respond and also what gives us hope and what folks can do to get involved, what we all can do to make change in our own communities. So as I mentioned, we have two special guests here. Sophia Huda with We Act for Environmental Justice, a fantastic organization based out of Harlem, and Lindsay Dahl from Beauty Counter. So I'm going to do a quick intro for both of them, so just bear with me while I pull out their bios so that I don't screw it up. So Sophia is one of the newest members of the We Act team. We Act is one of my favorite environmental organizations that's out there. They've been a real pioneer in the environmental justice movement. She is our new toxic specialist and is helping to lead their Beauty Inside and Out campaign, which we're going to be hearing about today. Sophia has spent several years with lots of experience working on various sustainability and environmental justice issues, including waste management, toxic chemicals, as well as water issues. In addition to her work at We Act, she is an adjunct professor at the New School in New York City, where she teaches undergrad and graduate level classes in sustainability. So we're really, really excited to have Sophia with us here today to talk about the good work that We Act is doing in this space.
Thanks.
Our other speaker, of course, guest here on Instagram is one of my old colleagues, Lindsay Dahl with Beauty Counter. I've known Lindsay for, probably at least 15 years now. It's been forever. It feels like a lifetime. Lindsay is currently the Senior Vice President of Social Mission at Beauty Counter, which, by the way, is just an amazing title, Lindsay. I'm jealous. And with her role there, she helps deliver on and operationalize the company's mission, which is to get safer products into the hands of everyone. I had the real fortunate pleasure to work very closely with Lindsay some years ago when she was also here working with me at Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families and the Mind Store campaign, where she was a deputy director. And she was one of the leaders that really helped build our federal campaigns advocating for both federal policy reform and also reform in the marketplace. So we're really fortunate to have both Lindsay and Sophia here with us today. So we're gonna try to make this interactive. So for those of you that are joining, I say we have dozens of folks already on the line, which is awesome. Please do weigh in with questions and comments. We're gonna pause throughout the conversation here and there to take your questions. So please feel free to type in your questions in the comment box. We'll definitely take some time to do that. And so before we dive into the topic, I really want to just first hear a little bit of your origin stories. You know, it's always fascinating to me to hear about like what motivated folks to get involved in these issues, because many of us, I think, have really interesting personal stories to share about what got them interested and motivated to work on toxics and environmental health issues, and what motivated them to particularly engage in beauty and personal care products. So maybe we'll start with Sophia. So why don't you go first and share a little bit about your story? So what got you interested and inspired to work on these issues?
Yeah, I guess it started with one of my first jobs, which was working with a plastics industry trade association in
Mm,
Brussels, actually. And so I worked on a lot of issues related to REACH, the EU chemicals regulation, including related to plastics, chemical additives in plastics, and food contact materials. And from this work, I learned a lot about toxicology. I was actually helping to create safety data sheets. So I really got into the weeds of all the
mm,
terminology, like carcinogenic, chemicals, mutagenic, reproductive toxicity, exposure levels, and migration from packaging into food, which I did not know was a thing until I worked on this project. And the thing that really struck me with all that work was, especially learning about plastic food packaging, I found it really kind of ironic that we were so concerned about and well versed on labeling the food in the container, but we had no idea of what the container was actually doing to the food and the
mm,
impact on our health in that way. And then the same applies to other products that we put in our bodies and apply to our bodies. And one big thing for I always point out to my students is tampons, for example. It's a product that many females use, or other menstrual care products. We all kind of have to use them. They're placed in highly absorbent and exposed parts of our body for long periods of time. We start using them at a young age. We use them for decades of our lifetime, and they have next to no regulation and oversight. And then the same for makeup and other beauty products. And,
mm.
women on average, according to the Environmental Working Group, use a dozen products a day containing about 168 different chemicals. So that's a lot of exposure. And so what makes me interested and passionate about this is I really feel consumers need to be better informed about these issues so that we have more control over the choices we make and more control over our health.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it on the head there. Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's kind of cool that you came from working on this from the policy level in Europe, and you've really now kind of taken that work and really bringing your experience and skills to advocate for reform at WEAC. So we're really excited and fortunate to have you here working in the US. So Lindsay, would love to, I know some of your story, but would love for those of you guys that aren't familiar with Lindsay to hear a little bit about what motivated you and got you interested in working on these issues.
Yeah, so I started working on kind of more traditional environmental topics like climate change and renewable energy. And I always considered myself really kind of in the conservation space. And then
Mm,
early on in my career, I got a job working on environmental health. And I really realized that our built environment has just as many issues as our external environment. And there need to be advocates to help make sure that internal built environment where we spend most of our days is also protected. I later came to find out that whatever is in our built environment has impacts where it's manufactured, how it's disposed, and understand the whole kind of ecosystem. But I think the thing that really drew me to this was not necessarily the health effects of toxic
mm.
chemicals, because at the time I was so young that I felt kind of like, oh, nothing's ever going to touch me. It was
Right, you were
more the,
invincible.
yeah, I felt that way. Wrongly so, but I felt I was drawn to this because I felt like, why are companies withholding information? Why are they not being transparent? And why are they not
Mm,
asking tough questions? Like, that is what really irked me. And I've always been someone that wants to change the status quo. Just because the status quo exists, that doesn't depress me. I think about, well, what can we do to change that? And so this was a very natural fit for me. And I started in Minnesota and started at the state policy level, then went to DC to help on federal reform. And I've worked with both Safer Chemicals and for Safer Chemicals Healthy Families, and with We Act for Environmental Justice for, like you said, about 15 years. So I'm excited to be here and be reconnected with two of my favorite nonprofits working in this space. And it's a really important conversation to have.
awesome. Yeah, we're really excited that you're still fighting the good fight, but now working for a major brand that is wasn't always a major brand, but has really grown exponentially in years and has been a real force for change in the beauty industry. And I think that's really one of the things that I think has been interesting about Beauty Counter has been that since the company's founding, you guys have been a real vocal advocate for reform and has really, I think, has really served as a model for other businesses in terms of thinking about the ingredients in your products from a transparency perspective, from a sourcing perspective, but also especially, in terms of today's conversation, thinking about how can the company ensure that the worst of the worst ingredients are not present, and how can we ensure that safer ingredients are actually being used in the beauty and personal care products and cosmetics that Beautycounter sells. So can you talk a little bit more about, why is Beautycounter concerned about ingredients in beauty and personal care products, and why should consumers care about the safety of ingredients in cosmetics and other beauty and personal care products, whether it's lipstick or shampoo or other products that we come in contact with day in and day out?
Yeah, happy to. So the biggest reason that Beautycounter exists, it's not that the world didn't need another beauty company. And our CEO always said, she doesn't come from the beauty industry. She said the world needed a beauty company that was asking harder questions about safety and creating products that people actually wanted to use, where you didn't have to compromise on how the product performed while using the cleanest ingredients possible. But at the core of it, the reason we exist is because of a growing body of science that now is 40 plus years strong, showing that chemicals we're exposed to through products in our day-to-day lives, some of them, not all chemicals are bad, of course, but have links to harmful health impacts. And that is particularly true for people of color who, especially in the beauty industry, are overexposed in different ways through the types of products that are both being marketed and actively used. And the science both shows that the existing status quo is putting people of color at a higher risk due to the toxic load, but also that the clean beauty industry, which is kind of a new term, but historically that industry hasn't really focused on creating and serving the shade ranges that are necessary. And so Beautycounter is doing both, trying to respond to the science, which I can talk more about if you're interested in how we use the science around disproportionate impacts into our safety screening, but also how can we create shade ranges that are appropriate for lots of different types of skin tones. And that is kind of where and why Beautycounter lives in this nexus of giving people a solution day to day, while knowing that in order to really fix the problem, it's not going to come through selling product. It's going to come through passing reform that protects everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's one of the things that I've always loved about Beautycounter, is really not just about getting your own company in order, in terms of ensuring that the ingredients are safe, but also being a voice for reform at the state level and the federal level. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But Sophia, I know WeAct has been, such a tremendous inspiration and leader in the environmental justice movement over, the last, I think at least 30 years. I think WeAct was formed in the late 1980s, if I get that, and I might be slightly off, and if so, I apologize. But, I know WeAct has done tremendous work on a range of environmental health and justice challenges, from, air quality issues in northern Manhattan to, the siting of polluting facilities in low-income communities of color, Black and brown communities. WeAct has also done really great work here in New York State, where I live, on advocating for reform of policies at the state level to ensure that everyone is protected from toxic chemicals. And I know over the last few years, you guys have really been begun to call attention to this issue, and Lindsay begun to speak about this. The issue of the fact that chemicals of concern is really a huge issue, particularly for folks of color, especially women of color. I know that studies have found that some products like hair straighteners and skin lightening cream can contain pretty nasty chemicals, which I think most folks would be shocked to learn. So can you maybe build on what Lindsay was sharing and talk a little bit about why should we be concerned about harmful chemicals in beauty and personal care products marketed to women of color? Like, why is this an issue that WeAct, as a leader in the environmental justice movement, has begun to lean into in the last couple of years or so?
Yeah, so I guess it starts, first of all, the idea of the Eurocentric concept of beauty. It's still sort of perpetuated in media and culture. And so, for example, I was born in the 80s and grew up with the idea that beautiful was defined by, fair skin, long flowing blonde or brown hair, blue eyes, and whatever, because that was the image that we saw everywhere. And so representation in beauty is a lot better now, but these concepts still persist. And if people of color are trying to conform to those standards, they go through extra lengths by using skin lightening or brightening products or hair straightening products like relaxers. And as you mentioned, they're full of toxic chemicals like mercury, phthalates, parabens, and other endocrine disrupting chemicals. And then another issue is that women of color can be exposed much earlier in life at critical times of development and more often. So they're more, for example, African American women are more likely to use hair products with endocrine disrupting chemicals like hair relaxers. They might start using them in childhood, and that can cause early onset puberty and subsequently increase their risk of breast cancer. Research has shown that people of color tend to have higher levels of beauty product related chemicals in their bodies. And these chemicals are linked to a plethora of health issues, including cancer, which I mentioned, obesity, poor maternal health outcomes, uterine fibroids, and asthma, among others. And then you touched on this a bit, Mike, but it's also important to mention that these are not the only pathways to exposure. We're also exposed to toxic chemicals, endocrine disrupting chemicals, etc., through other pathways. Lindsay mentioned it as well, in our ambient indoor air from the furniture we use, plastics in our food packaging and other things. And again, this being an environmental justice issue, because communities of color tend to have higher level exposures to a variety of environmental hazards, as you mentioned, because where these communities are sited, where they tend to site polluting industries close to lower income communities of color, etc. And so it results in a much greater cumulative burden for them. So with beauty products, this is at least a pathway that if you're better informed on the risks, if there's more regulation over that, we can control and minimize at least this pathway of exposure and the subsequent harms.
No, I think that is, it's such a critical issue. And I think an issue that really has not gotten, I think the issue of chemicals of concern in beauty products, while it's gotten a lot of attention, it hasn't gotten the attention it deserves. And certainly, the issue of the racial injustice and the inequity and the disproportionate impacts that folks of color face from a variety of products, from a variety of situations, from where they live, where they work, or maybe their kids go to school, food justice issues. There's just a range of challenges that communities of color face. And I think that this is a issue of, I think most folks would be shocked to learn that there are really nasty chemicals, cancer-causing chemicals, hormone-disrupting chemicals hiding in everyday beauty and personal care products that folks of color, especially women of color, use day in and day out. So I'm really excited that We Act is really leading the charge on this and really beginning to help spark a national conversation on this critical issue of racial injustice and environmental justice. I want to remind folks that we are going to be taking questions in a little bit. I see a couple of questions have come in, and you can either type your question in the comment, or if you want to make it even a little bit easier for me as your moderator, you can click the little question mark box, and we'll also look for your questions there. So, Sophia, you were talking about how we need policy change, and I wanted to turn back to Lindsay for a second. And as I alluded to earlier, I think that's one of the things that I've really admired about Beauty Counter since the founding of the company is, again, it's not just about walking the walk, but it's also about talking the talk in terms of advocating and being really vocal for policy change at the state level and at the federal level. I think most businesses usually don't call for Congress to reform their industry, right? That's not something that you typically hear about. And I think that has been one of the things that has really made Beauty Counter unique from many of your competitors, and of course from many of the other, from many of the bigger brands in the beauty space. So if you could talk a little bit about, what Beauty Counter has been doing, particularly to advocate for policy reform at the state and federal level. Why is Beauty Counter engaged in policy reform, and why has this been an issue that you guys have really leaned into?
Yeah. So the reason we've been advocating since we started is really because the credit goes to our CEO, who doesn't come from a policy background, but she knew that in order to really fix the industry, we needed to fix our broken laws. And so I joined the team, and we've been lobbying members of Congress, doing district meetings with people all across North America, including Canada. We've been passing laws in state legislatures across the country. And the reason for that, it's funny when you're lobbying, a lot of people are like, well, why are you asking for the government to regulate your industry? And isn't this going to take away your competitive edge if other companies suddenly have to be safer? And our response is always, yeah, that's the whole point. Like, there's a space, and there's room for leadership. We're here to show that you can create safer products without harmful ingredients, that people like to use. And I think it's important. When I was at Safer Chemicals Healthy Families, they would always, members of Congress would always say, well, we can't do that because it's not possible to make these products. And so I think it's really important for a consumer brand like Beautycounter to show that, number one, it's possible. And also businesses, whether we like it or not, have a lot of sway in our bodies, whether it's state or federal. And I think it's important for us to use that business voice in a positive way. Because again, whether we like it or not, companies are lobbying all the time. They're lobbying typically to maintain the status quo. And our whole philosophy since the beginning is, if our goal is to get safer products in the hands of everyone, it intentionally doesn't say Beautycounter's products. It's about getting safer products and creating access. And right now we know that a single consumer brand is never going to reach every person. Our products currently are not affordable to a lot of people. And so our goal to create access and safer products, regardless of how much money you make, how much time you have to research before you go shopping, is really the solution lies in giving the authority to the FDA to take action. So that's why we put our time and energy there. And it's something that we've been unwavering on since we started. And it makes my job really fun.
That's awesome. And we'll talk a little bit later about how folks can get involved in some of those efforts to advocate for policy change. In the nearly 20 years that I've been working on these issues, actually over 20 years now, we always are calling for policy change at the corporate level, at the government level, but we also often hear from folks, well, what can I do personally to protect myself, right? Like, what can I do to buy safer products for my family or for my children or for my, other members of my family? And one of the questions that just came in recently that I wanted to ask, maybe I'll ask Sophia, and Lindsay, if you want to chime in, please do. But I think they were asking about, what are things that women of color can start with? What are some tweaks that they can start with to get on a better and more safe way of life with beauty products? I don't know if you have any simple tips that folks can pursue to find safer products for themselves or their families, particularly in terms of women of color.
Yeah, so there are safer alternatives out there, and we have some suggestions on our Beauty Inside Out campaign page, as well as to do your research through organizations like Safer Chemicals, etc. Have suggestions for alternatives, and then in terms of hairstyles, you can also adopt natural styles. You can try to do some DIY options at home in terms of hair masks, etc. And also just general, find ways to reduce your exposure. So, if you're regularly getting your nails done, maybe eliminate that or cut that down, things like that. But most important, I think, and that's part of what the campaign is about, is keeping yourself informed. And that's what we're trying to do, is to inform people so that they are aware of these alternatives, and they're aware of what is in the products that they're using, and how they can sort of reduce that exposure or completely eliminate it if that's an option, or that's the best option.
One other thing that I'll just say, and I touched on this briefly, is we often say that we unfortunately can't shop our way out of these problems, right? There are simple steps that we can take to protect ourselves, buying safer products from brands, like Beauty Counter that are working to advance safer solutions. One of the things that we will often tell people is, with our Mind the Store campaign, whole idea of the campaign is to engage and challenge retailers to step up and improve. So in addition to advocating for policy change at the state and federal level, in addition to buying safer products for yourself and your family, another step that folks can do is to reach out to the companies that you shop at. So, next time you go shopping at a store, have a conversation with the store manager and ask them what are they doing to address harmful chemicals in beauty products, especially beauty products marketed to women of color. Send an email to the customer service line at the retailers that you shop at and ask them what are they doing to address harmful chemicals like phthalates or formaldehyde or mercury in beauty products marketed to women of color. Sophia, you mentioned the Beauty and Inside and Out campaign, and kind of along these lines, we'd love to hear a little bit more about it. So if you could tell us a little bit about what the campaign is all about, and why do you guys think that businesses and retailers should act? And we've done some great work with you guys over the last year to begin pushing retailers to act, and would love to hear a little bit from you about how have some companies begun to respond to the campaign in the last year or so?
Yeah, sure. So the goal of the Beauty Inside Out campaign is essentially to reduce exposure amongst adolescent, prepubescent girls to toxic chemicals found in skin lightening products and hair products. So one approach is, like, in the absence of more comprehensive regulation on what goes into beauty products, we think that it's retailers who can really make a difference for their customers by being more proactive and involved in what kinds of beauty products they're stocking. So ultimately, the hope is if the products are not selling or not being stocked, rather, producers will stop producing them. And there has been positive movement in this direction. So we have the retail report card with Mind the Store, and they looked at beauty care products. And so in response, Target and Rite Aid pledged to start screening beauty products marketed to people of color for toxic chemicals. And that's a huge win. And it really adds a momentum to this campaign and what we're trying to do. And granted, they're not the only place that people buy personal care products, but they are the largest retailers of beauty and personal care products in the United States, and they're industry leaders. So it's huge. And then, like I've mentioned before, another major aspect of the Beauty Inside Out campaign is increasing awareness on the issue. And so We Act is doing that through events such as this, workshops, focus groups, and just general outreach as well. And so the hope is that, like I said, the regulation is not there. Regulation takes a long time. Lindsay mentioned there's always lobbying that involves, and regardless, the process is long. So in the absence of that, and while we wait for regulation to catch up, we can get the retailers who sell these products and the consumers who buy these products to be more aware of these issues and to sort of vote with their wallet, so to speak.
Awesome. And do you want to give a quick plug for your website there? I think one of your colleagues might have put it in the chat there.
Yeah. I think Chris put our website up there, and that's the campaign website. And actually, so you can find a lot of resources on there. And we're currently running surveys for girls and feminine-identifying individuals aged 13 to 17 in northern Manhattan in the South Bronx. So if you're a parent or a girl or feminine-identifying person of that age, please sign up for a survey so we can learn more about the kinds of products you're buying and using, and that helps us inform our campaign and inform this work better.
Awesome. And that URL I see your colleague put in the chat is weact.org/beauty. So if folks want to learn more about the Beauty Inside and Out campaign, definitely check them out, weact.org/beauty. And if you're interested in learning more about the commitments that Target and Rite Aid have made to begin addressing this issue, you could check out the most recent retail report card, which is easy to remember, retailreportcard.com. So, shifting gears a little bit, and Lindsay, you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but one of the related questions is, what challenges do brands and manufacturers face when aiming to create safer beauty products for folks of color? So, you're uniquely positioned as an advocate and sustainability leader in a major clean beauty brand that has really been, working to drive change in the industry in recent years. So from your perspective as a leader, in the business community, what challenges do you guys see when aiming to create safer beauty products, especially for folks of color?
Yeah, I mean, making clean beauty products is really hard, but it's
Mm.
especially hard when you start to look at color cosmetics. So if you think about color cosmetics, one of the biggest issues is heavy metal contamination, which heavy metals will never appear on the ingredient list. It's because they're not intentionally added into formulations. And the heavy metals actually tag along mostly to natural colorants because they come from the earth. Which is one of the reasons we always say we use a ton of natural ingredients, but natural doesn't always mean safe,
Mm.
because when you start to get deeper pigment tones or brighter color for blush or lips, some of those brighter colors have higher heavy metal load. And we found that confirmed through our testing. And so one of the challenges for us at Beauty Counter, which I think over the years we've done a better and better job as we try to improve our product line, is to make sure that we're getting using testing of heavy metals and contaminants, again, that don't appear on the ingredient list during the product formulation process. And I think we've landed on some really good formulas that meet the needs of different diverse skin tones. We're working on more shade extensions as well, while
Mm.
still keeping safety top of mind. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I think the other challenge is kind of related to a question that I saw pop up, which is it's hard enough to create ingredients that are safe for human health. But what about when you start to add on supply chain risks, which we focus on human rights or sustainable packaging,
Mm.
all of those together, which is kind of the sweet spot for Beauty Counter, I think is hard to do just because it takes a lot of time. It takes asking hard questions, and oftentimes it comes at a cost to the business and consumers, which is part of the reason we need federal reform. Some people think that if you pass laws, products are going to be more expensive. When we look at other product categories, that actually hasn't happened. And that's why we talk about creating access to more people through passing laws, because it helps level the playing field by making the rules, the tough rules, spread across the industry, which allows costs to come down.
Mm.
And the final thing I'll say is that Beauty Counter also includes disproportionate impacts to people of color and other vulnerable populations into how we define safe, what is safe. So we did a congressional briefing. We've actually done two congressional briefings on this topic in Washington, D.C. In 2018 and 2019, where we brought in scientists that help talk about how and why you need to ask different questions when you're thinking about safety if you're going to be considering vulnerable populations, which is something that we take a lot of pride in doing at Beauty Counter, and it helps us define what we consider to be safe.
Sounds really easy.
Super easy.
Yeah. We'll just get that done overnight. No big deal. Well, on that note, I think we've all been working on these issues for a long time, and it's tough, right? It's not as easy as we might think. I mean, I wish that we can all just wave a magic wand and all the carcinogens and hormone disruptors and reproductive toxins could just go away, and we can all just address other pressing issues. But sadly, these are really challenging issues. I always think about how this fight is a marathon and not a sprint, and we need to really stay in for the long run. So the work can be frustrating, it can be challenging, it can be disappointing and depressing at times. But I'm curious, what keeps each of you hopeful? Like, what keeps you inspired to fight for change? Like, what is it that gets you up every day that really motivates you? So I'm curious if you can share any words of inspiration from, maybe any projects you've worked on or anything that really gives you hope to continue fighting this fight. And maybe Sophia, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, well, I think what gives me hope is that there is progress, there's increasing awareness, and action on the general issue of environmental justice, and
Mm.
also specifically on toxic chemicals in personal care products. So, for example, the Biden administration formed its Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and WEAC's director, Peggy Shepard, sits on that council. And like you said, she co-founded this organization 30 years. So it took 30 years, but there we go. EJ is on the agenda, right? They're also, yeah,
That's
they're
awesome.
also, yeah,
That's
um,
huge.
it is. It is really huge, and it's really great. And also, there are bills currently in work at the federal level that specifically address the issue of toxic chemicals in beauty products, so such
Mm.
as calling for a ban of PFAS chemicals in cosmetics. So a few years ago, no one knew what the heck a PFAS was. Now they do. They've heard all about them, and now they're learning they're in products that we put on our skin every day. And that might hopefully that inspires a lot of consumers to say, I need to be more careful, I need to be aware, and I need to make the demands that I don't want these in my products, I don't want them touching my skin. And I mentioned at the beginning tampons, for example. So in 2019, WEACT and its partners were instrumental in seeing a New York State bill passed on menstrual product labeling. And California also has a similar law in place as well. So now you have two of the largest states in the country requiring menstrual product labeling. So that's huge progress. It took a while. It's a little slow, but it's happening. And so that's what keeps me motivated and keeps us motivated to continue this work.
That is awesome. And great work in New York. That is really amazing. Lindsay, you want to share any words of inspiration, like what keeps you motivated and inspired to continue this work?
Sure. I've always been a fan of celebrating the small wins. I think
Yeah.
that's what keeps me going. And the thing is that the small wins keep me engaged, but really, I think the thing that gives me hope is look at how far we've come in 20 years. I mean, you, I remember when we were talking about flame retardants and couches and BPA and baby bottles, and people were just like, what are you talking? Like it just totally glazed over. And
Right.
now consumers from all different backgrounds, from all across the country, from different political affiliations are asking tough questions. And to me, that's really inspiring and hopeful. And in the last 20 years, collectively as a community, we have passed dozens of laws. Companies are now creating safer products, they're asking harder questions, and it feels like a completely different work environment than when I first started. And so when I pause to think back of 15 years feels like a long time, but actually when you see how much has happened in the short tenure of
Yeah.
my career, it's really inspiring. So I tap into that when I feel down.
Yeah. No, I think when you and I first met, we were each working on some of those issues. And yeah, like who would have thought we could have gotten bisphenol A out of baby bottles or flame retardants out of couches? It was just unimaginable at the time. And here we are, and we're just plowing forward, which is really great. One other example that I just wanted to note, I mentioned our annual retail report card. We just put out the most recent one a couple of months ago. And if you take a look at it, we've seen since we started benchmarking companies, tremendous change among major retailers over the last 7+ years since we launched Mind the Store, and over the last 5 years since we have been working on this. For example, just within 1 year's time, 64% of retailers we evaluated between 2019 and 2021 made substantive, significant improvements to their work on chemicals. For example, in the beauty space, both Sephora and Ulta Beauty made substantial progress in beginning to address chemicals of concern in the beauty products that they sell. So we're making change, and this is really a winning. This is a winning fight. So folks should definitely be getting involved in our work collectively. With Mind the Store, folks should definitely check out our website, retailreportcard.com. Sadly, there are other retailers that are not doing enough. And if you go to our website at retailreportcard.com, you can click the Take Action button and send an email to the dozen companies that are failing to address chemicals of concern in all sorts of products, from beauty products to plastics to apparel and more. So with that, we're pretty much out of time here. And, I just gave a quick call to action, folks to visit our website. So would love to hear from each of you. Perhaps Sophia can go first. So what can folks do to get involved in your work? How can they get involved in Beauty Inside and Out?
Yeah, so first of all, you can keep yourself informed by following our accounts on Instagram, Facebook. If you're in the New York City area, you can become a member of We Act, come to our monthly meetings. We discuss a lot of other environmental justice issues, not just focused on the toxic chemicals in beauty products, but toxic chemicals in other areas, as well as other environmental justice issues that affect Northern Manhattan. Like I mentioned, if you're the parent or you are a 13 to 17-year-old in Northern Manhattan, please sign up for our survey on our website, weact.org/beauty. And also stay tuned for the results of our survey for adults and for kids and more from the campaign. And yeah, just keeping yourself informed, I think, is the best way that you can support our work and see change in this area.
Awesome. Yeah, so definitely check out react.org, check out their Beauty Inside and Out campaign and get involved. And Lindsay, I know you guys have been, really working hard to change, especially at the federal level. So what can folks do to get involved in Beauty Counter's work to reform our broken cosmetic safety system?
Yep. I just put in the conversation to text Better Beauty, all one word, to 52886. And we'll send you a link where you can easily click on it and email your members of Congress within less than 2 minutes. It's super slick. And members of Congress do see and read those emails. They're aggregated by staff. It is how we move the needle. It's how we recently had the Senate reintroduce the Personal Care Product Safety Act, which is a bipartisan piece of legislation. The House is going to move soon as well. So things are happening. And I feel like now is really the moment for us to push better beauty laws across the finish line. But we do that through engagement with everyone like you. So my call to action is to email your members of Congress and talk to your friends and family about this. No one told me to say this, but donate to Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families, and We Act. They are organizations that are really doing great work on the ground, and ask tough questions of the companies that you're buying from. I think it's really important for us to also push the marketplace at the same time.
Awesome. And thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. And what was that text number again to send a message to members of Congress?
Yeah, text Better Beauty, all one word, to 52886.
Awesome. Great. I'm going to do that as soon as we get off the line here. Awesome. And again, the other thing that we encourage folks to do is to get involved with our Mind the Store campaign. As I mentioned, check out our annual retail report card to learn how retailers are and aren't addressing chemicals of concern in beauty products and other products. You can find out how your favorite retailer ranks. Share the link on social media, and just like you can take action with members of Congress, if you go to retailerreportcard.com, you can send an email to the dozen companies in this year's Toxic Hall of Shame and calling on them to take action and to do better to bring safer products into the hands of their customers. With that, we're pretty much out of time. I really want to thank everyone for joining. Definitely encourage folks to follow our accounts on social media. Follow We Act for Environmental Justice, follow Lindsay Dahl, follow Beauty Counter, follow myself and colleagues at Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families. Really hope that folks will get involved in these efforts. And if you're interested in joining our next live conversation, we're going to be moving over to Facebook in just a couple of weeks. On Wednesday, August 4th, we're going to be doing another live chat. Next time, looking at how dollar stores are and aren't addressing chemicals of concern in products sold at dollar stores, another major issue of environmental justice and racism. My friend and colleague, Jose Bravo, who coordinates the dollar store campaign, will be joining me. So August 4th, if you go to the Safer Chemicals page on Facebook, you'll soon find information about that. Mark your calendars. And I want to thank everyone for joining, and especially Sophia and Lindsay for participating in all your great work. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a great day, and stay tuned for future conversations we'll be hosting on Instagram to continue some of these conversations. Thanks, everyone, and have a good one. Take care.
Thanks, Mike. Bye.
Bye-bye.